Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. This is our first masterclass, marketing masterclass of 2021, and we thought we'd start the year off with the topic of how to get specified in 2021. So today is really all about thinking for construction manufacturers, what they need to be thinking about in terms of driving increased specifications amongst their audience, how to reach the right audience, how to provide the right information, and how to deliver things across all the combination of different marketing channels that might be available, ultimately in order to win more business and to drive up specifications. So we'll be running up to an hour today, and hopefully you'll find today's session useful. We've got many more of these planned, so do keep watching out. So just some welcomes first of all. So I'd like to welcome the panel. So just introducing myself, I'm Robin Cordy, Marketing Director at MBS. I'm delighted to be joined by Josh Bell from 299 Lighting, who's an MBS manufacturer user and is going to share some great tips with us about what they've done at 299 Lighting and how they've really ramped up their specification marketing during 2020 and what they're going to be doing this year. So morning, Josh, thanks for joining us.
Hi, yeah, good to be here.
And I've got my colleague Izzy, who is marketing manager within the MBS team, doing an awful lot of work with manufacturers and understanding what's happening there. So hi, Izzy.
Hello.
And last but not least, Lee Jones, who is our head of manufacturer solutions at MBS. Lee spends a lot of time working directly with manufacturers on both the kind of strategic and technical side. And prior to MBS, he spent many years with Ideal Standard delivering their digital and BIM strategy. So hi, Lee.
Morning, Robin. Morning, all.
Morning.
Good. So today, really, we've got a mix of kind of different industry expertise and knowledge, and hopefully we'll be sharing lots of interesting insights and things that that manufacturers can take away and put into practice within their own marketing strategies for the year to keep improving things as we go through this tumultuous time. Okay, so without further ado, first point on the agenda, really, we thought we'd let Josh introduce himself a little bit more and tell us a little bit about 299 Lighting and kind of who you are and what you do, really, Josh, and then we'll come back to some of these things probably as we talk through the rest of the session.
Cool. So hi, my name's Josh. Yeah, so I'm a project engineer and our Rebus CPD kind of creator and presenter at 299 Lighting. So we're kind of a construction manufacturer, obviously. So we create or we manufacture luminaires, but also alongside, you know, technical project advice, consultancy work, project management, etc. So we work within office fit out is mainly where we work, a bit of education, a little bit of hospitality. But yeah, we're essentially a specialist consultant into the industry, providing expertise on lighting and then products to go with it. So we do the design side and the supply side. My role splits between the kind of technical side, the technical product side, and the technical project side, alongside our technical marketing as well. So that is in the form of our CPD content, basically.
Great. And who's your usual target audience, kind of with your specification marketing, Josh?
So we generally work with specified by architects and electrical consultants and contractors as well. But we're in the specification market. We're really working with architects and consultancy practices.
Great. And in the last, we'll cover it more in a moment, but in the last year or so, and certainly for this year, you've focused a lot on digitisation and product information and CPD, haven't you?
Yeah, certainly. Well, we found it was the time really not to kind of sit on our hands and do nothing, but try and kind of get all those jobs done that we always said we'd get done, you know, and you never quite get round to. So yeah, in the last year, with all the time that we've suddenly had and the lockdowns, and obviously in the early part of 2020, the industry paused a bit, didn't it? So we used that time to start digitising properly, really get our digital content up to date, because it seemed to have taken a massive role in kind of promoting our message and getting our brand out there. It's increased dramatically as to how important it is.
Yeah, and you've seen some great results off the back of it as well, haven't you?
Yeah, we definitely have. Yeah. I think just the fact that we've been able to stay in people's vision, we saw, you know, overnight as the first lockdown hit, especially in 2020, we saw overnight people, especially, digital marketing content, just completely stop. And there'd be companies, small and big, that would be marketing every day on, platforms like LinkedIn. We'd be seeing new posts, really good content every day. And suddenly overnight, it just stopped because all they kind of had to talk about was product, and suddenly wasn't particularly relevant anymore, especially at the time of the lockdown. So the fact that we were able to just, digitize and create content that made us stay in the forefront of people's minds I think was a great achievement from 2020.
Brilliant. Well, you've got a great story to tell, so we look forward to hearing a little bit more as we go through the session today. Okay, so onto our first point of discussion, and we put a few slides together just to walk us through today. It's certainly not a presentation, but I couldn't resist including this, which really summed it up for me. The year 2020 brought to you by the letters W, T, and F. I mean, who could have predicted what would have happened last year? This time, even last year, none of us knew what was coming. And there's really been an awful lot of change since, and we're still kind of in the midst of some of that in a way. So the first discussion point I really wanted to include for this morning was, what can we learn from 2020? I think it's really important that we could kind of cover off lessons learned and what we're planning to take forward, and what manufacturers out there can do to really learn from the experience of last year and take that in. So who wants to kick us off?
I'll go first, Robin, if you want, or Josh.
Go on, go on, Lee.
Obviously, I think there's the first thing is that people still need to be engaged with. I know when we got some of the statistics back from the RIBA last year with architects in particular, it was 81% of them were working from home. So obviously people were having to shift, and I mean, you'll know yourself as a family person with children, dogs, etc. You're not always contactable at exactly the time somebody wants to contact you as well. So your patterns of working seem to change. And I think obviously if you're trying to engage with people, you need to make sure that you can sort of reach them, not around the clock necessarily, but outside of usual hours. Now that doesn't necessarily mean face-to-face. It could be other digital platforms. To sort of reach that. I think that's a good starting point, perhaps.
Definitely, yeah. And Izzy, we saw huge interaction, didn't we, across all the NBS digital content through last year, and the manufacturers that did that as well also were getting great results.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely had the audience was there, and they were still very active and very engaged, albeit in a different, not the office anymore.
Yeah, so it almost made there was more of a captive audience online. People weren't out and about as much, and we certainly saw that by really ramping up on our digital content, these webinars, online content, articles, social media, tweets, and so on. There was a much more engaged and kind of ready audience right there, ready to engage. So yeah, that's definitely something I think we'll all be taking forward to next, from last year into this year. Josh, what else have you guys learned that from the experience last year that you'd want to mention?
Yeah, so for me, I think it's all about learning to be dynamic and preparing to change your strategies, reasonably quickly. So I'm probably going to sound like a bit of a broken record. CPD this year has become a massive part of our marketing strategy in last year. But actually, our marketing strategy completely changed because we realised that in the short to medium term through 2020, people wouldn't be that interested in the product because in the first lockdown, especially, the construction sites were closed. So there was no specification work going on. A lot of people were immediately furloughed. So it was about how do we change our marketing strategy? And again, one of the things, as I said, that we really invested in time in was our CPD content. So it's been something that we've been talking about since I joined 299. And actually it was in the lockdown that we signed our contract with Reba. It was that we started to produce this content because actually these architects, we can still speak to them. They're still at home, they might not have much specification, but they still need their training. So let's stop talking about the product so much and start talking about what else we can offer, the services that we provide, the human side of the company, how the company's coping, but also, we've got this other, these other services that you might not know we do that we can provide, and it keeps us in the forefront of their minds. So that was a massive change, was obviously the CPD content, but it was all about being dynamic, change the strategies up depending on on what's happening in the rest of the the industry at the time, and yeah, just keep it relevant.
Definitely. Lee, do you think there was a bit of a mindset shift in amongst the kind of construction manufacturing community last year?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this was hopefully what I was going to try to talk about sort of next, but I think the mindset shift was very much split. Obviously, there was a lot of companies that furloughed staff, and some of them just completely seemed to halt production and seemed just operating generally with sort of limited sort of face-to-face contact staff that would be on the phones. There was, however, quite a number that seemed to think, yeah, this is a chance to do something different, although I think it was probably the minority. However, I think like 29 Lighting have done, these are going to be the ones that see the success from it. So thinking, how can we change the strategy to keep engaging with the customers? But also, I think the thing that seems to go amiss is that the people that have decided to take on projects internally whilst they've got that downtime. So most of the manufacturers I've worked for, everything's done at absolute sort of breakneck speed, and it's all done with a skeleton crew to just enough, just in time. And if you have anything that becomes additional, it really sort of adds pressure onto the daily working routine. It's like, well, we haven't got the resource to do this because we've got this project going through, or this, that, and the other. So whilst people are in the quiet period, I think looking at sort of tidying up internally, things like getting the product data structured, so they can provide a better, I don't know, website service, for example, or if it was a customer that was perhaps working with MBS to get the listings on MBS sources, how can we get this? I know I'm forever going on about the CPA report that we did a couple of years ago, which I'll be honest with you, the reason for that is that the results were terrifying. That over half of the specifiers say that they can't find manufacturers' technical information easily enough.
Yep.
And if that's your selling sort of face, it's clearly something that you're doing wrong. So take advantage of the time. I think that's a great thing to do there whilst you've got it.
Yeah, definitely, and we'll get onto this a little bit more. Izzy, it doesn't mean it's if you haven't made those moves in 2020, it doesn't mean that it's too late now, does it? It just means that that you can take those learnings and still absolutely put them into action now.
Definitely. I think also with one of the key learnings that I feel like we're bringing into the team from 2020 is the importance of, I think you've talked about it there about being dynamic, Josh, but also just generally about how important brand awareness is. I think often brand awareness can be, because it's not doesn't deliver the result straight away, but I think it's like a time where you can, and I think a lot of, like we've talked about, a lot of manufacturers have taken that time to really invest in their brand awareness. But it is really key, because that is the top of your funnel. And if you are just focusing further down the funnel, then yes, you'll be getting results straight away, but at some point that will dry up. So it's just making sure you're still getting those people engaged, and I just really think 2020 showed the importance of brand awareness, and the fact that those people who continued to invest in it should be reaping the rewards as and when things have started to kind of pick up again, and as we start hopefully this year returning to somewhat some form of normality anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a marketer, you need to make sure you're doing both the kind of brand building, thought leadership, awareness side of things to get your name out there, and then also delivering the hands-on detailed stuff that people, when people are actually needing to write a specification or use some technical information on a project, they need that as well. And actually the best success comes from blending all those things and using them together. Great. There's so many things from last year. What we've done is kind of take that into a little summary of kind of 5 major themes that we thought would be still very much present this year, and that will be something that manufacturers need to bear in mind when thinking things through for 2021. So we couldn't really go through this without mentioning the COVID word. We're not going to spend hours on this one, because there's plenty of conversation around that out there, but certainly it looks at this moment in time like the impact of COVID is set to continue. Things are uncertain at the moment. We're not locked down in quite the same way as things were in 2020, where a significant amount of construction sites were closed. Most of them are open now, some of them operating under constraints and so on, and most manufacturers are operating, and projects are moving ahead, and specifications are absolutely still being written. We're seeing that within our platforms every day. There's still thousands of specifications active within our systems. But it's certainly not normal times, and we don't know exactly how things are going to pan out. But with any luck, and if things with the vaccine go well, that impact will hopefully lessen in the second half of 2021. And we may see a bounce back. So that kind of leads into point 2, which is around the economy and what that means for construction. So certainly fair to say that it is currently set to stay unpredictable, but there are reasons to be positive for construction. So excuse me, the CPA have just released some data saying that they expect a 14% increase in construction activity in 2021 compared to 2020. There's a few other predictions out there. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I think it's fair to say we need to watch things very closely. We also think sustainability and climate change is going to come back on the agenda in a big way this year. So not that it was ever really off the agenda, but obviously COVID has kind of taken center stage in the last few months. And with the new administration coming in the US and COP26 summit happening later this year in the UK, this isn't going away, and it's absolutely something that the industry needs to keep focusing on. So, although everyone's thinking about COVID and everything else, this is something that absolutely needs to be considered as part of manufacturers' marketing strategies. Building safety regulation and digitisation. So we kind of combine these together, even though they're kind of separate. But in terms of macro industry drivers that are going to keep shaking things up, Lee, we're seeing some new regulations really coming into play this year, aren't we? And we've also seen the recent announcement of a building products regulator that's going to be established.
Yeah, we have the construction product safety regulator was announced. It's going to sit under the Office of Product Safety Standards under government. So that's obviously going to have some impact and changes. It's quite fresh, but I think manufacturers can start doing stuff. I mean, the clear thing that people are going to be looking for is third-party certification. So if you've got that, getting that marketed and noted about is obviously going to help you quite a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And digitisation. So we've talked a lot about BIM over the years, and that's absolutely still a trend that's continuing. The pace of digitisation of things within construction accelerated massively during 2020. We've shared data on this before. There's been talk of kind of 6 years worth of digitisation happening in 6 months and things like that. We absolutely think that's going to continue through 2021. And Josh, this is probably something that you guys are well aware of at 299, isn't it? And something that you're factoring in.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So it's one of the other points actually, and Izzy kind of made it earlier, that the step to digitisation moved a lot quicker. So one of the things that we use the time for as well, as obviously I said about the CPD content, was also doing the streamlining all our data. So it was looking at all the data for our products, because you're right, as Lee was saying about sometimes it's the data's produced with a skeleton staff, and you get it where it needs to be, to get it up, and then sometimes it gets a bit forgotten about, or it gets behind because other jobs take over. So we again use that time, just to streamline the data, reconcile it, or get everything really up to date, and then try and get it on platforms like MBS Source and on Chorus. So we've just got all of our products on Source and Chorus. Yeah, definitely. Just to make that specification element easier, and so it helps people find us easier, helps people specify us easier. Exactly what Lee was saying about, if people struggle to find the specification information, they're not going to specify you. People want ease of use, don't they? Yeah. And once they find something easy, they'll keep going back to it.
I mean, that's what I've worked with MBS as a customer for a number of years before I actually joined the business. And I think what some people don't maybe understand is obviously because of the sort of the 50-year historic nature of providing the specification templates. There's over 30,000 product data templates that we have for each component. So if a manufacturer is looking to structure the product data, we've already done all the hard work, and it's already set up against the relevant regulations and standards. So if anybody's looking at doing that, there's obviously a lot of scope there where we can help with it. And obviously Josh's case is sort of proof in the pudding with that.
I think so.
Sorry.
There you go, Josh.
I was going to say, on that note of, the templates that we just had, one lad in the office, Robert, he was working on it, and it was some work to get the data reconciled. But actually, already, you know, we've not been on the platform a particularly long time, and I think we've already seen at least 4. Well, actually, I think I was talking to Taylor before Christmas, and she'd mentioned we'd already been on 4 specifications on the platform. You know, that was within a couple of months. So I think, you know, with Lee's phrase, the proof is in the pudding. I think the fact that we just spent that time, you know, dedicated a bit of resource, has already shown, you know, decent results.
Yeah, do you find that's going to help, Josh, as well, with like your own websites and things? Obviously, from an efficiency point of view, if the data's all in one place, you haven't got to start running around looking for it from different parts of the business. Yeah,
exactly that. We kind of know where it is, and we can link, you know, use the links to the MBS platform on our website, so we can, you know, people might be on our website because they know us, and we've got our own, you know, source of specification information. We have got data sheets and that hosted on our website, but at the same time, I don't think it's quite gone live yet, but we're working on, you know, just making sure every product on our web page is linked to the, you know, to the product in MBS, so that if that's, you know, the route that the client chooses, if the architect is a user of MBS Chorus, then they can easily go from our website into Chorus, or they can just use Chorus directly and find us. So we're trying to just streamline it and make sure every, you know, all the dots are connected to make it just one nice continuous circle of specification that, you know, can't be undone. There's no falling point, hopefully.
I think there's a really good point there that you know, it's not you've not done digital and then you can move on. This is kind of the lifeblood of things going forward. So that product data and those activities just need to kind of, you know, be maintained and continue, you know, in perpetuity, really, rather than, you know, just do that and then forget about it. That's the way things are going forward. And then the final one we had to share on this was
continuous update.
Exactly, yeah. It was, you know, specifiers. Obviously at MBS, we work a lot with the specification audience. You know, they continue to be a time poor audience who are, you know, looking to get things done to a high quality, to a high standard, but need you as manufacturers to provide the right information that they need to make their decisions at the right time and in the right formats. So, you know, if anything, they're going to be further squeezed this year. We've seen a huge amount of people, you know, moving onto our digital and cloud platforms. In fact, the vast majority of NBS specifications are now written in MBS Chorus, which is our cloud platform, and we expect that to move to 100% this year. And so that's really the place to be for manufacturers if you're wanting to expose that data. But it really comes back to that point. And Izzy, I know you've seen this a lot from working with the manufacturers about, you know, getting that right information out there at the right time in the right format.
Definitely, and I think it's seeing the specifiers, they're a consumer at the end of the day, and if you look at how we shop nowadays, you can't really afford to not offer that level of service to people, because those people are using Amazon, they are using the big retailers where the information is all there that you need, and it's easy to find. So I think if that's how people shop in their like day-to-day lives, and it's that quick and that easy, you've got to think, well, when they're obviously working, they're going to start expecting the same level, which is obviously a lot of the reasoning behind us launching Source in the first place and making it sort of like to be the level that it is. But it's just, you know, thinking about the specifiers as a consumer of your information to obviously get in the specification.
I think there's a great point there, Robin, as well, about the time poor nature, but then obviously going back to the regulation and people wanting specifications to be as accurate as possible. A lot of manufacturers, maybe the ones that don't sort of sell the off-the-shelf type product that are quite complex systems and things, they can actually write the specification themselves for the specifier, and that this is another avenue that we're seeing quite an influx in, is manufacturers actually using MBS Chorus once they've got the products within Source to actually help write that specification. So that obviously does two things. It saves the specifier time in the fact that they're not writing that themselves, but then it's helping secure the spec for the manufacturer and ensuring that that's correct, and they aren't going to get it in and then it's got to go to whoever in the office to sit and work through what's wrong with it and correct it and pull in new products that are no longer sort of obsolete and things like that.
Yeah. So although the, you know, the informational needs of specifiers is different to if you were a retail consumer shopping for a TV or something else, actually the experience they expect in terms of being able to browse products and look for data and get the right information at the right time online to be able to make that decision. That, you know, they expect exactly that experience, and there's no real reason why we shouldn't be providing it. Brilliant. Okay. So, you know, those are our kind of 5 key themes. Obviously, these are kind of considerations that as a manufacturer or anyone really in construction, you know, you need to be factoring these in to help with considering of a marketing strategy. The next discussion point really was around, so given all that, and a bit of an open discussion here, really, what do we think are the key marketing considerations for construction manufacturers in 2021? So a bit of a broad one, but Josh, do you want to, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so for me, I think it keeps coming back to the word we keep using. It's about, you know, maintaining that digitisation. Keep working on the digitisation of the content and making sure that your digital content is really top notch. Because, you know, just from a marketing perspective, I've been trying to speak to people on the phone for CPD bookings. I did it in the first lockdown around, well, actually second lockdown around August and September, and I've done it again in January. And actually, it seems these big, you know, companies, you know, massive companies don't seem to have the phone infrastructure to be able to transfer calls around teams working from home. And as we saw, 81% of architects are working from home. So if we can't speak to anyone on the phone, how are we marketing to them? You need to make sure the content is top notch. So for us, it's going to be all about, you know, making sure we're reconciling and streamlining that data like we've already worked on. It's linking everything together. And we're also working on our SEO and our website optimization and user optimization, just to make sure everything links, everything flows. It's the easiest possible process. And the idea is, hopefully, as Izzy was saying, we can give enough data on platforms, especially like Source and Chorus, that people don't actually need to speak to us to specify us. They can just find the information. There's no need to wait for an email response or a telephone response. You know, it's all the data's there. It's digitized. It's easy to access, and the specification process is therefore really easy. It's kind of, yeah, it's what we're working on, and obviously keeping working on our CPD content, keeping that fresh and relevant, and new content coming through there as well.
So you mentioned SEO there, Josh, and search engines. Do you want to explain a little bit more about that for anyone out there who hasn't kind of, you know, looked at that yet or considered it as part of their strategy? Why you've gone about doing that?
Yeah, so it's really the role of one of my colleagues, Georgina, actually, who does some great work on it. But it's about kind of how is your content, especially your web page, how is that found in search engines? It's search engine optimization. So there's, you know, a plethora of companies available now, and you can search keywords, and it's where do you rank in that list? How can we get you, or how can we get closer to the top? How can we get on page 1 of Google? So it's about making sure that the content's really relevant. You know, Google is, I think, very clever at recognizing keywords and content and activity on pages. So it's making sure, again, the digital marketing, the digital content is really fresh, really up to date, really relevant, and you know, strong. It's not waffle. It's not a list of keywords. You know, it's really strong content that's going to help the consumer, but also in turn that helps Google find you and essentially improves your SEO. It moves you higher up the ranking pages, and then it becomes this kind of cycle where your content gets better, so Google rank you higher, and then people find you more, and so Google sees more activity, so they rank you higher. So it's, yeah, that's kind of what SEO is about.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because you know, it links in with the point that, you know, specifiers may start their journey looking for products in a number of different places. They will often start in Google. So, you know, you want to make sure that you're appearing for the terms that they might search for, but it can happen elsewhere as well. And, you know, Lee is interested in your thoughts about kind of, you know, for thinking about channels and where specifiers start in their journey for finding products, and what that means for manufacturers and their marketing. What would you say on that?
Yeah, sure. So I think that there's obviously two key ones there. Obviously, Google's going to be people's first port of call. And then obviously what was Reaper Product Select has now obviously been replaced by MBS Source. And I think that's always been the go-to sort of platform for looking for construction products. It was always a bit like the yellow pages for construction products when we were when I was a manufacturer. So yeah, we get asked quite a lot, sort of like, what's the most searched product or term and stuff within the website, but it gets a little bit more complex than that, because what you then have is, obviously you've got things like your organic searches through the website, but then you've got the ones that land from Google. So obviously MBS and Robin and Izzy, you'll know this yourselves, because it's obviously your department that deal with it, but we would spend a lot of time making sure that our SEO is correct, so that the manufacturers that we're representing, if somebody searches them, we're going to rank high up within the Google search. So yeah, the search engines definitely is a big thing, and I think those two platforms for construction are really where you need to be considering, like, how am I going to surface in this, and making sure that they tie in. I think a lot of the time MBS listings will actually surface higher than the actual manufacturer's webpage because of the SEO setup within it. So it just shows that it actually works if you get that correct.
Yeah, so they might start their specification journey by doing a search on Google or on Source, or they might actually, that decision might not be considered until they're actually writing the specification. That happens in a lot of times as well, doesn't it, Lee?
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, you could have an outline specification done. I mean, if you look at the RIBA plan of works, the spec really starts getting developed at around stage 2, which is the concept stage, but it's sort of like the building envelope and maybe some of the main sort of mechanical components within that point. When it starts being developed at stage 3, it's really when the manufacturer's products start being pulled in, and I think something like Source or the manufacturer's websites where the products tend to be researched there. But if it's got to the technical design stage and the products still haven't been identified and they finalised at that point, a lot of the time it will actually be the spec tool where that's looked at. So Chorus, obviously prime example. MBS have obviously announced at the end of last year that we were not supporting MBS Building and Create anymore. So as you rightly mentioned, Robin, all of the MBS spec users will be Chorus towards the end of this year. So if the products are in there, it's obviously that last port of call before you've missed the boat. Really, it's you need to make sure that you're getting in the place where you can be researched, whether that's on the internet with a website yourself, or whether it's through a platform like MBS Source, but definitely making sure that you're available to actually specify in the specification tool is paramount.
Yeah, so I think that, really big point there is that, that specification and product selection, that can happen at any stage of the journey, really, from early stage design through to technical design and specification. So for manufacturers, it's essential that they're visible at all those points in all those different channels. Izzy, what about in the kind of, the wider marketing landscape and trends and changes and things that we're seeing or we expect for this year? What do manufacturers need to be considering in that respect?
I think having a look at what they've obviously done, I think have a look and take a step back of what you've done in 2020 and not, I think, we've done that ourselves, taken a step back and really reviewed the year. So ensuring that you've done that so that you can really look at, well, actually what did work for us. Like you were talking about there, the visibility, like making sure that you have got visibility in like all the different areas of the funnel. So you are bringing people down from like brand awareness right through down to the sort of like lead area. Yeah, I think, a key consideration is looking at what you did in 2020 and what worked well, because one of the benefits that we do have for 2021 is that we know what's sort of in a way what's happening, and we can kind of adjust, and we can be a lot more flexible, and we've got information or we've got experience from what happened in previous lockdowns, or what's happened in 2020 to then be able to plan for 2021. So I think using that is a key consideration.
Yeah, and there's some really powerful tools around marketing automation out there now, aren't there? Where for anyone who's not using marketing automation, it allows you to join up users' journeys across lots of different channels. Izzy, what would you say to the main kind of benefits to manufacturers of thinking about marketing automation and CRM?
Yeah, with I guess one of the key things is that if you've got different pools of people or different audiences, if you set up your automation correctly, obviously you can send them on different nurturing journeys. So dependent, and making sure it's like relevant content to them rather than just sending them all your marketing materials. With the automation, if you've got the detail about them, you can set up those processes so it's actually providing them with information they're going to actually be interested in and is relevant to maybe their specific field or something specific to them. without which obviously to do manually would be sort of nigh on impossible. You wouldn't be able to focus on so many different audiences, and you wouldn't be able to tailor your messages. So yeah, if you've got that capability, it's definitely something to look at, because I think that's, consumers we're all consumers of information, and we're all kind of flooded. Like my inbox for my personal email account is just awful. Like I just don't know where all these emails come from. So you've got to think, like, lots of people are flooded with information. So if you can make your information relevant to them, then they're going to be more interested in listening to you, because they don't have sort of really the capacity to trawl through everything.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, digital gives us the opportunity to make all of our marketing comms more targeted and more relevant. So you're much more likely to have success as a manufacturer if you reach someone who needs your product at roughly the time that they might need it, and they're much more likely to engage. As an interesting point as well, it allows you to measure the funnel and get better data on how your marketing activities are performed. Josh, I'm interested in how you kind of measure the value of marketing within 299 and kind of performance metrics and things like that.
Yeah, so actually I was just gonna say what quite a really good point Izzy was just making about how do we target our audiences, and just to pick up on that, actually you need to make sure your marketing is as effective as it can be, especially at the minute. So it is, rather than just having blanket content, it is about targeting it to specific people. We've just been working on what we've called our marketing journey. It's just a series, a small email campaign that will be different depending on how people found us. So it's, did they find us on SEO? Did they find us by, because they know one of our products? Do we know them already? Did they find us because they came on a CPD? And each of their journeys through our marketing content will be different, and to make sure it's really relevant to how they found us effectively. If someone found us through CPD, the next email we don't want to send them is not going to be, look at our product. It's going to be a little bit more about us as a company or something like that. So that's a really good point about keeping it relevant to the person, not just relevant to the time. How do we measure it ourselves? I think was the other question. So yep. we do have a CRM system. We do monitor, our, not like Big Brother monitor. We, monitor our communications to our clients. We look at how often we're contacting them. We have automation set up to contact them, and then it's all about open rates on things like the emails. We look at how many people are coming back to us. We look at repeat customers on CPD. We look at repeat specifications. So it's kind of difficult to measure, but we have got monitors in place to try and see what activity works best. We found for things like CPD, LinkedIn adverts, so paid for sponsored adverts, were actually a really rubbish investment, really. We had a lot of interest and hardly anyone actually turn up, versus our own organic kind of content generation and our own organic marketing was a lot more successful. But we've also had success with LinkedIn adverts for other areas of the business. So yeah, it's I think it's not the easiest thing to monitor, but it's about just keeping on top of the data, keeping on top of who's talking to you when.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's certainly easier to monitor and measure than it is, say, for example, to measure the return on investment at the spend of a big trade show or something like that, where you might be ploughing in tens of thousands as a manufacturer, and you really have to go on instinct as to whether it's worth it or not. We talking of trade shows, actually, we mentioned COVID earlier, and we don't know when those kind of restrictions are going to be lifted, but certainly from where I'm standing right now, I think it's unlikely that there's going to be any large scale physical events. Possibly this year, we don't know yet, but certainly there might have been something that would have been on manufacturers' radars for years gone by, but not so much this year. Great. Any other points on this one, guys? The next thing we've got, we're kind of leading on from this. So last year we unveiled our a little tool that we created for manufacturers called the Specification marketing cycle. And it's really just a kind of a framework to help manufacturers kind of map out the different stages of the process that they need to be thinking about when positioning their marketing. So it's about reaching specifiers wherever they are on that journey. And specifiers may have lots of projects going on at once. So for any project, they may be in a different stage. But awareness is about, early stages. They might need kind of outline information, case studies, brand building, that kind of thing. Interest, starting to show interest in actual specific products. Selection is when they're actually choosing products. Specification is when it's all being documented and put into the actual specification, and final decisions being confirmed within the project documentation, and then through to construction itself. And then re-engagement. So after a project is completed, essential to keep re-engaging with those audiences. So I think we've talked about a lot of different tactics and channels. Some are more relevant in early stages of the project, and some of them later stages, and some of them throughout, really. So I guess Lee, would be interested in your views probably as to how how manufacturers should go about kind of thinking about this cycle and making sure that they're optimizing their activities for it.
Yeah, certainly. So it's quite similar to what Josh was saying just when we were discussing around the last slide, is that it's tailored to where the actual customer is in that particular part of the journey. So yeah, if you're at sort of stage one around the awareness sort of side of things, this is really where people just be on that little bit of a knowledge journey. They'd be looking for, one, inspiration as probably the number one thing, and two, sort of information about products, where they've been used before, that kind of thing. So case studies are a great thing here, and whether you're sort of putting these on your own website, or whether you've got an MBS source listing and you want to upload them onto there, making sure that they're sort of highly visual and engaging, and sort of explain why the products were chosen, what the sort of benefits were from using them, and so forth, and keep those current. The amount of manufacturers that we see that write these things, and then they were from like sort of 10-15 years ago, and do you still make the product is probably the first question, and then the second thing is have you not got anything more recent? Have you done any more jobs since then? So really keep those up to date. I mean, they're quite easy to compile. You could just refresh the older ones, for example, with a newer project and more up-to-date images and stuff. So keeping that there is great. I think CPD really starts to come in here as well, and feeds through probably into stage two. Obviously, pre sort of COVID lockdown, the main reason somebody would have contacted you to get a CPD done was because they would have had a particular project that was using those products, or needed to use those products and systems. So there was obviously quite a lot of engagement there. Obviously, with chartered architects in particular, they've got to do those 35 hours a year, and now they're working remotely. That hasn't changed. They've still got to facilitate that, but obviously they might now perhaps have a reduced project list, so they can pick and choose a little bit more. So keeping your CPD up to date is a great one, and as Josh has mentioned, doing that digitally and allowing that to be done online is something that's proving massively popular. I know that the CPD team have been quite inundated with people wanting to update the CPD content to digital, whether that's been delivered through a Teams meeting or Zoom or something like that, or whether it's actually like on demand. There's a whole host of different options that people can do to still drive that engagement. So yeah, that's probably the first point. When things start to get developed, so going into sort of stage 2, stage 3, is where the products are obviously starting to be researched more, and this is where your SEO really comes in, and getting your own website sorted out. So going back to that bit we mentioned earlier, and obviously Josh has spoken about it quite a lot as well, about getting your data structured internally. It doesn't only help you with efficiency inside the business to actually find things in one place. It tidies things up a lot, but it also helps the specifier to do that as well. So if your data's more enhanced than it has been previously, whether that's on your own website, or whether that's again an MBS source, or whether it's even an MBS course, which is obviously directly linked from the listings in source, it's going to allow the manufacturer to provide that information to the specifier in a lot more clear manner, and maybe look at the USPs over the competitors. So if you've got things in particular, and I know, Robin, you mentioned about the topics earlier, things like legislation, sustainability. I mean, these are really, really good, solid points. That there are quite a lot of gaps with certain manufacturers, and a lot of manufacturers globally with this, where they might not list things like the third-party certification that proves that, look, yeah, we're saying this product does this, and here's the proof because somebody independent's actually gone and tested it for us. It's not just us saying it does that. And then the sustainability things like your sort of embodied carbon, power consumption, water consumption, anything that revolves around how sustainable that product can be. The specifiers are looking for this at that particular point. So yeah, that's the key thing there. And I think getting through to stage 4, where the final written specification's done, I mean, that is the whole goal of the RIBA Planner Work stage 4, is finishing the specification. If you're not in the spec tool, it makes it really, really difficult for the specifier to do that at that point. So obviously this is where MBS comes into its own for manufacturers.
And this is a major goal of a lot of the marketing, isn't it? Is to get in at that point. So building up to that, whether it's the awareness, interest, selection, or whatever, it's the specification that counts. Yeah,
this is it's a whole journey, and people need different data and different things from you at different times within that journey. It's not just bang this on a website and forget about it. It's how you facilitate that and how you support it internally as well around that timeline.
I think that journey is key. I think having awareness of like the fact that you need to get people from 1 to 4, I think is something people really need to think about when they're looking at their marketing. Is their marketing getting people from 1 to 4? Because if you just focus on 4, for example, you're only going to focus on the people who already know about you, and then that's going to really limit the people that you attract. So it's kind of like, in a way, going, well, the ultimate goal is obviously stage 4 to get into the specification, but actually, are we doing the steps to bring new people on that journey? I think it would be interesting for people to look at their sort of marketing strategies and see if it's kind of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a format that's happened in loads and loads of different circumstances. I mean, even think about when we were kids and used to play computer games, you got to complete a certain level before you could get on to the next one. And it works exactly the same. It's everything's in different stages, and you need certain things to finish that certain stage to get you through to the final one. So yeah, I mean, there is the odd chance where somebody will just specify you at stage 4 and they might not have researched you previously, but I think the scrutiny that's coming down on building design now in particular, is that starting to dwindle, and people are doing a lot more work in the background than they might have done in the past.
Yeah, great.
Sorry.
Go on, Josh. Go on.
I was going to say, from my side, I think this cycle's about showing your competency as a brand. So as we've seen, a lot of people will jump straight into this specification marketing cycle at stage 3 and just start promoting their products and just start talking about the product they offer. Actually, I think, and you're right, you might get a little, you might get some result from that. It might be short-term result. Actually, by just moving back to stages 1 and 2, building that awareness, building that interest, I think you actually end up by building a stronger relationship almost with a consumer or with the client. And that might possibly be that you've never even spoken to them, but they feel a bit more trust in your brand. They feel your brand might be a bit more competent at what they do, because it's not just we've got X product that can do this. It's about who you are as a company, what you've achieved. The case studies, you can see previous history, you can see CPD, you can see they're technically competent, they really know, they're experts in their field, they know what they're talking about. It's not just they've got a product that will work for this project. It's these are a company that really know what they're doing, and I think will really support me through a project. So it's not to be underestimated. I think that the power of stages 1 and 2, the awareness and interest stage, definitely.
Yeah, it's that project partner piece again, isn't it? And not just a supplier. Is that this is something that can be quite complex. It's very often time consuming. So if you can sort of partner somebody and give them that extra level of ability, that they're going to remember that time and time again as well afterwards. So yeah, I completely agree with you there, Josh.
Absolutely. And Lee, just think about stage 5. One of the things manufacturers are often worried about is being swapped out and having the specifications changed. How does this help with that, and why is the spec the best place to be still? So yeah, obviously the specification has usually been where it's at, and you do get a lot of feedback. People saying, "Oh, well, they might have put equal or approved here, or this, that, and the other." I think that the key thing to sort of note at the moment is the industry is changing rapidly, and it has been changing for a number of years now. If we look at the draft building safety bill that was published last year in July, the relevant stage gates that are going to come in through construction, particularly around sort of
the stage 4 and stage 5, where the specification and the drawings or the model are going to be vetted to check that they tie in together, and then that what's as built ties into what the specification was. The scrutiny that's going to come down on that is really going to be more prevalent, I think.
Yeah, so the spec's going to be more important than ever.
Correct, yeah.
And change it at your peril.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. I mean, cultural issues within the industry have always been either great or a problem, depending on what sort of aspect of the industry you were looking at. And I think, yeah, with this, you're going to see that culture shift, and we're seeing it now where people are terrified now of being liable for something. And I think the onus on the lead specifier and the lead contractor, as the appointed parties, they're not going to want to be left sort of out in the cold or sort of at risk if a manufacturer has been swapped out for somebody else and it doesn't perform in the same way as it should have done within the written documentation. Absolutely critical.
Absolutely critical. And then think about the final part, re-engagement. This is a really important stage, isn't it? Because actually a lot of specifiers will revisit products or manufacturers that they know of already, but it's important that manufacturers keep their foot in the door with them and keep that relationship. How do they best go about doing that?
Definitely, because I think, you know, the people who have already bought from you, like when we were talking earlier about that awareness and interest, how obviously key those are. If you're, you know, if somebody's a completely new person, like new prospect, and they haven't dealt with you before and they haven't used your products before, you know, the awareness and interest stages are so important to get that confidence. So really, like the people who have made it through to stage 6, if they've had I think re-engaging them, but is making sure that actually they've had a really positive experience with you, so that they will then go on to use you again. The ways of, like, you know, re-engaging is not just you know, pushing. It's still obviously, you know, that they're interested in your products, but actually at that time they might not be necessarily looking for products. So it's like thinking of, have you got newsletters, have you got like a positioning? Definitely don't do a positioning like a thought leadership positioning on a subject you aren't, you know, it isn't your area of speciality, but like think about what you've got in your business that you guys could specialize in, and shout about that, and give even your current customers information that's really important and relevant to them, to keep that engagement up, so that when they are then in a project and they need to use a product that you've got, that they, you know, you're front of mind still. I think it's important to not just bank on the fact that they've used you before, so they'll use you again. Yes, they you know, hopefully they've had a positive experience, so that is the case, but also thinking of other ways that you can keep them interested in you.
Brilliant. So just kind of in closing on this slide, a couple of things to mention for our viewers. First one is that we're making the spec cycle available as a free downloadable tool for manufacturers. So it's going to be on the website, manufacturers.thembs.com/spec cycle. You can go on there. You can download a PDF version that you can then use to help with your planning or your marketing and your activities and campaigns. And we kind of touched on it there, that you really need to think about each stage and think about what activities are relevant to your brand and your product to make sure that you're getting those results. And the other thing to mention is, for our series of webinars for the marketing masterclasses, we're going to be doing a kind of deep dive into some of the different tools and tactics that you can use across these stages. So we'll be running webinars on kind of SEO for manufacturers, PR, online PR for manufacturers, social media for manufacturers, even looking at tools like Glenigan, which can help with project identification and prospecting, which combined with MBS can be really powerful. And we'll be spending more time looking at the detail of the specification and digital data and construction process as well. So do keep tuned in for those. Brilliant, guys. All right, just a couple more things that we're going to cover before we sign off. So we wanted to give an update really and just mention a few things about MBS Source. So firstly, Lee, maybe if you could tell us a little bit about what Source is for people who don't know, and how it relates to Chorus, which is the other side of our platform. And then interested in hearing from Josh, who recently signed up for Source as a customer, and tell us why and what you're getting out of it. So Lee first.
Yeah, sure. So MBS Source is an online search engine for construction products. It's a place where a specifier, contractor, whoever it is, can go to look for products, look at construction product companies to see what services they offer, see what products they offer, but also then drills down into all the product specifics, so you can do things like comparison against one product to the next and so forth. Historically with MBS, and a lot of people listening in, if they're familiar with us, would have been aware of the National BIM Library, our IBA Product Selector, and MBS Plus, which was the specification listings that went into things like MBS Building and MBS Create. Quite disjointed way of doing things. It was 3 separate tools that was quite complex for manufacturers. So what Source has done is actually brought all 3 of those into one single place. The great thing with this, obviously, is it's managed by MBS's technical authoring team, which look after all the relevant standards, guidelines, and all the relevant information that sort of shapes what product specification needs to look like and how it needs to be compliant, and stay at the forefront of different things. Now, as a result, we now have this single source of information, which is MBS Source, and it actually feeds the MBS Chorus platform. So the written specifications that are being done, again, are online and cloud-based. The data that's within Source is the same data that is now within MBS Chorus. So it's a one-stop shop for manufacturers to help them get that engagement through that whole project timeline that we've just been discussing on the previous slide.
Yeah, great. And so if you're a manufacturer and you're on Source, users can find you either via the web, on mobile, etc., or they can find your products actually within the specification environment. And I've got some stats here. We've seen a 1,000% increase in cloud specification usage in 2020 compared to 2019, and we expect that to continue this year. And we're also seeing now 2.5 million individual specification clauses written within the MBS cloud platform every single month. 2.5 million a month. So that's a huge number of individual lines of specification. And the messages for manufacturers, if you want your products to be within those lines, it's the best place to be is getting your products in Source. So thanks for that, Lee. Josh, just interested to hear from your perspective as a customer who's recently signed up, kind of how that fit with your overall strategy and what you're looking to get out of it.
Yeah, so for us, I think it falls back into this thing I keep talking about of making it as easy as possible for the consumer. So obviously there's other specification platforms, but I think MBS is a very trusted brand. It's well respected, it's well renowned, it's out there. So to partner with the MBS brand effectively, I think gives an element of the credibility to the product as well. But it's about having that, I think Lee's just said it, that single point of information, that single source where people can find you, people can trust the information, people can access a massive amount of technical information to make it as easy as possible for them to specify you. Because I think it's I don't know if it's wrong to say, but I think inherently people are lazy. If there's 2 products that are similar and it takes
I think the technical term is they seek the path of least resistance.
That's the one. That's the one. I know for me, if I was specifying a product and it took me 10 steps to specify one, because I found a product I like, but I can't get access to the data sheet. I have to call up the company to ask them to email it to me. I've sent it over. It's not quite the right one. Or I want to find out about a different product now because maybe I can use it for something else. It becomes a bit of a hassle. If I can find one platform where I can access that information almost instantaneously, and it's there and it's up to date, and there's a whole host of it. It's very, very in depth, all the information that's provided on Source and Chorus. Actually, that kind of works from the specification point of view. It's super easy, so that's the one I want. I've spoken to a lot of architects who have all said, I said, how do you specify products? They've literally said to me, if they use BIM, it's the ones I can find the BIM files easiest for. They'll change a specification if they can't quite get the BIM, if it's hard to get the BIM file for the product they want to use. They'll go, oh, well, I know I can get it from X manufacturer, we'll use them instead. So it's about having that ease of information, having that ease of access. But I think, again, that comes back to the re-engagement element of the spec cycle, because if it's easy, they're going to use you again, because they'll remember that was an easy process. Oh, I've got another project, similar products. Let's go back with that. So for us, it's about making it easy, having all the information in one place, and having a real good quality of information.
Brilliant, yeah. And the other thing that that Source does as well is allow manufacturers to collaborate directly with specifiers on the spec. So you don't need to trade emails and phone calls. You can actually, as a manufacturer, you can write the clause for the specifier, make sure everything's correct, make sure all the correct products and systems are used, take the hassle off their plate, and make sure that your products aren't being specified incorrectly, and make sure that it's going in there. So really unique offer. Thanks, guys. So the final bit just wanted to mention was around CPD. So again, Josh as a customer, but you can tell us about this maybe in a second. But Izzy, we saw a lot of move to digital CPD last year, didn't we? And huge demand for that, and some really good results amongst our customers. What would you advise manufacturers to think about in terms of this for 2021?
Yeah, like last year was like an excellent year for CPD for various reasons. I think something that really stuck with me was a report that we'd done at the end of 2019, where architects and specifiers had asked for that, that they are time poor, so they need to make, CPD needs to fit into their working lives easily, and also that they want more digital content. I think there was like some resistance, which is understandable, with change, resistance of people moving away from a face-to-face offering to start to deliver digitally instead. Initially, and then obviously with the pandemic, that just all of a sudden just completely changed the game, and we just saw hundreds of our providers, and we've got hundreds of our CPD materials are now offered as online seminars. So it was really interesting, and it also, I think it's worked well for the providers. Did a case study with one provider who'd said they'd seen I think it was like 1,000, they'd had like 1,000 sort of like 1,000 people that they had been able to speak to about CPD within like a certain time period that, the previous year they would never have been able to do face to face. I'm not saying that there's obviously not a place for face to face, because there definitely is, but I think it's showing sort of like the benefits of that digital content. The providers have benefited from it, but also it's easier to fit into people's working day. So I can see for the
Was that Siri or Alexa?
Siri. I don't know. Did I say Siri?
But yeah, I think CPD is so important at that awareness stage in terms of getting in front of people, and then again at that re-engagement stage, just to keep front of mind and keep building that positioning.
Definitely, I think like you said, it is an awareness tool, and it's a softer approach. It's going in and talking about you as more your product category, and I think Josh talked about it earlier as being credible. And I do quite a lot of the marketing for Reba CPD, and that's one of the key benefits. Is it's not just about ultimately I know people want to sell or get into the specification, but actually it's positioning yourself and being able to position yourself as an expert in your field. So when somebody does want to then specify a product like yours, they're going to think of you because they've got that, you've built that credibility with them by providing them with information. So it's definitely more of a long-term approach, depending on obviously where somebody is within the buying cycle, can be a lot more of a long-term approach. But it's about raising your brand awareness, but in a really positive way, and it's educational and beneficial for you.
Great, yeah. So Josh, about putting that into practice, you guys have gone digital CPD crazy recently, haven't you? And seen some great results. So what are your kind of top tips and experiences?
Yeah, so I think that's some really good points Izzy was making there. It's the credibility thing, I think, is huge. I think, and people are often, or specifiers are often, I think, more receptive to content like CPD, because I think they're aware that it is about a bit about showing your credibility, but it's not a hard sell. They're not going in there expecting to be sold why you need to specify this product because of X, Y, and Z. They're understanding you as a company, and then the product stuff can kind of come later in the marketing cycle. Putting it into practice for us, so digitising it has been huge. So we've only actually done it. Well, I did 2 right at the start of the year in person. The rest of my CPDs have all been digital because it was what it had to be. But actually, that's allowed us to reach a wider audience. I actually did a piece on LinkedIn. Coming back to the points we were talking earlier about sustainability, I wrote an article on LinkedIn just about how much fuel doing CPD online has saved us to come at it from a digital aspect. So if I'd have done all the CPDs in person that are to all of the individuals that I delivered CPD to. From July to the end of November, I'd have driven 22,000 miles. I'd have used 4,000, I think, 1,800 litres of diesel, and it was 4.7 tonnes of CO2 that, would have been emitted into the atmosphere from the van. So digitising it has enabled us to talk about the sustainability aspect of it.
Yeah.
Digitising it has also allowed us to get a bit clever with the automation. So when people register for our CPDs, they get then sent to our website. When they've filled out the registration form, it redirects them into the website. When they finish the CPD, it automatically sends them to our thank you page, which has links to sign up to things like our member space, which contains more technical information. And it obviously gives us their data, they've given us their email address, etc., which means that we can then continue the marketing cycle to them. So digitising it has really made it, easy to re-engage them. And then from the re-engagement step, if you keep the content relevant, if you keep producing new content, so I'm working on CPD number 4 at the minute, then we can go back to the people that have already had 1 or 2 or 3 of our CPDs and say, you've not seen us for 4 months or 5 months, but by the way, we've got this new content. Do you want to book on?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at. And it's actually on that point, once we've got people on one CPD, it's really easy to get them back for, or not really easy, but easier to get them back for CPD number 2 and CPD number 3, which are already prepared.
And that builds that re-engagement and that awareness and that continued knowledge, and then you'll be front of mind when they're moving into the later stages of the cycle to think about choosing a product.
And because they're all about different topics, it gives you demonstrates expertise in not just one field, which gives them a wider scope to use you effectively. So our CPDs are on workplace lighting design, wireless lighting controls, and emergency lighting. So there's 3 different areas where we could be used, where someone could bring us into a project.
Yeah. Fantastic. Wow, we've covered so much there, but we're almost out of time, really. So we covered the full cycle there, really, in terms of how to go about thinking about the the specification marketing cycle and the process and on all the different channels that you need to think about. I think some of the key messages are that there's a bit of uncertainty still there, but there's absolutely the opportunity to keep driving specifications for manufacturers. But it relies on that kind of blend of the right information at the right time across the right channels and done in the right way, and take advantage of all those digital opportunities that are now presenting themselves. So huge thank you for all of you guys, Josh, Izzy, Lee. Thanks for giving up your time and sharing those. I think we've got some really, really useful insights from everyone there. I hope everyone's enjoyed the session today. As I said, we're going to be running a lot more marketing masterclasses for manufacturers this year, which are really going to help you understand the things you need to do to keep driving those specifications. So if you'd like to find out more, get in touch with us or get on the website and download the specification cycle. And we hope to see you again soon for the next one of our webinars. So thanks again to the panel, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
See you later.
Cheers.